You're not live.
Okay, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Senator Cummings. And I'll just mention publicly, Representative Sevilla has a bill on the floor right now that's quite important to her. So she's going to be there for a little bit, and hopefully that won't take too long, and then join us in progress. Representative Pat and Representative Sevilla and I did get a chance to meet and discuss, and I think these are very discrete things, but I want to kind of put them into two categories. There are two things that you asked for changes on from our proposal. Actually, one was a pushback on our proposal that we'd like to push back on again, and I'll describe that to you. The other one is something that you have added to the bill that we would push back on and prefer to not have in. The other things that I want to mention here, I'll put in the category of, word changes that I think are meant to clarify. And some of them relate to language that you put in. It's not that we want that language to come out, but we want to make sure that it has the right, end result. So with that as a brief introduction, so, and I haven't counted these up. There's probably a half dozen of these things. So why don't we start with the I would say the most meaty things related to changes that you've recommended. We would like to see the governor appoint, whether it be the chair or the executive director. In your bill, you've got them doing both. And we would prefer it to be one or the other. And, as we discuss this, I think the executive director is someone that, frankly, the resources of the executive branch in identifying that person would be most helpful. And I think our preference would be that the executive director continue to be appointed by and hired by the governor, whereas the chair be elected by the board. But our preference is not to have the governor doing both. Okay. So that's one thing. The other thing that I will point out, and I've got to scroll down as to the page number. And by the way, it's on 21. I think the document that Maria just sent out in the last couple hours is the same pagination as the one we were working on before. This is on page 21. Our preference is not to have that new overbuild language, number 2. Frankly, it seems constrictive on CUDs, which we were fine with a language that was there before. And I don't think this is additive. I think it's constrictive. I say we. Okay. So that was a second piece that we would push back on and like to have that language not included. So those were the two things that I would highlight. In terms of, I'll call them language changes. I'm now lost in my document here.
I'm still scrolling for 21. So.
Oh, I beg your pardon. I beg your pardon.
Let's go 21, back.
Yeah.
I've got that. You want to get rid of what was it? Number incidentally 2. Language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I beg your pardon here. I got to find my notes. I had already pointed out to Maria that starting on page 33, the connectivity initiative language in 7D, it says authority all over there. That has to be changed to board, but that's just a typo.
Okay.
What page is that again, Tim?
It was on 33.
Okay.
It was the language that referenced the connectivity initiative, and it references the Vermont Community Broadband Authority as opposed to board. That was a holdover.
Okay.
Cut and paste.
Yeah. But I just wanted you to be aware of that I flagged Maria for that. The bottom of page 31, and I would say this is a question as much as anything. I would say the House conferees have a preference on this, but what it looks like here is in the connectivity initiative, as it exists essentially for the rest of this year, it would exclusively go to what it says here as service providers. But it looks like this would exclude CUDs. And I just wanted to be clear that that was the case. And if that was the case, why? We'd prefer to have the CUDs, as they always have, be able to be qualified for, any grants that come out of the connectivity initiative. But I wasn't sure what the angle was there.
Okay. I don't think we've made a hard decision on that, so.
Oh, okay. What it looked like to
that
me
was another cut and paste.
Okay.
Okay.
Can I jump in quickly?
Yes, Maria.
So I think that's just reverting to the original statutory language, which just says service providers, which would include, as it always has, the CUDs or EC fiber.
Okay.
So I don't think that was meant to be exclusionary.
Okay. So this is just my, I guess, not being clear on the color coding. As I saw the color yellow there, I was thinking that was language that wouldn't be included, which is the case, but I didn't read service providers as including CUDs.
Okay.
Got it. Okay. So question answered. I'm moving up in the document now to the bottom of page 20, our favorite subsection E. And again, this is a word change that I'm hoping would provide clarity. We refer here to a universal service plan does not conflict or undermine the deployment plan of an existing communication union district. I think our preference would be to replace deployment plan with universal service plan because it's a defined term.
Okay.
And deployment plan, as we've done a little homework on, can be a variety, kind of a wide variety of things for a CUD, from their very earliest kind of business development plan to kind of the last mile nitty gritty engineering plans that they're doing. So
I'm looking for this on the bottom of page 20.
Yeah, bottom of page 20. It's in this subsection E.
Yeah, it's closer to the top in the.
Yeah, and this one. Okay.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
All right.
So it was the deployment, changing that to universal
Okay.
service plan instead of deployment plan.
Okay.
So it sounds like we do have slightly different pagination. The next one I'm looking at is, this is in this, I'm still in the grant section, subsection C.
Could I just ask,
Yeah.
do we expect to have this in writing, or you're not ready to ship us something, or what?
I had not gone through this with Maria in terms of putting it in a draft.
Okay, no problem.
If I'm hearing pushback on some of these things, then then we've got something to talk about. But
Okay. I haven't heard anyone scream yet.
okay, well hopefully that's not coming. But on some
Keep going.
still in the grant section, subsection C, in my copy it's on page 19, and this is where the board shall establish policies and standard grant terms and conditions that. And this is where I think Senator Brock had been interested in adding the continuity of operations section, which is fine with us. As we went through this, again, thinking about some of these changes, there's no opportunity for an applicant to seek a reconsideration or appeal of a board decision. And I think it's appropriate to have the board establish a policy where a grant application could be reconsidered. I mentioned this to Maria earlier, and when I mentioned the word appeal, generally you're appealing to someone or to somebody. I don't know who that would be, but again, this would be for the board to establish a policy on reconsideration.
Okay. We talked about that. It must not have made it in. But I do remember a discussion about an appeal to the board at some point. So we at least thinking along similar lines.
Aubrey?
Yeah, and I just want to point out, Representative Briglin mentioned the applicant, but in a public proceeding, I would imagine it might be possible that another interested party could appeal the decision in the other direction. But it's mostly, this is a public process, and there needs to be some kind of reconsideration process that affected parties have access to.
Okay.
Well, and as this question came up, and someone asked me this question, so what if you don't like a decision, what do you do? And my only answer to that was you sue. And maybe there's something short of going down that path.
Let's hope so. We won't get anywhere.
Exactly.
Well, I also would guess
Oh,
whether or not, there's an issue that if you effectively are appealing to the same body that just denied you, are you dragging the process on needlessly? It would seem to me that if it's going to be reconsidered, there ought to be something that we write down that gives a basis for that reconsideration, as opposed to simply presenting the same evidence to the same people who just said no or yes.
Yeah, and I guess what was in my, as we were thinking through this, in our favorite subsection E, at the bottom of page 18, is it 18? No, it's bottom of page 20 on my copy. Might be slightly different for yours, but that E basically says what the board will do and what the board will determine. And thinking in that case, if a board determination didn't come out favorably for, in this case, the CUD, the CUD might want to have the opportunity to more directly interact with the board. This doesn't indicate that would happen. Again, this proposal is simply to give the board the diktat that they have to develop a policy on this.
Okay, so we don't
the
have to figure it out. We had talked about appeal to the board, but that was when we were looking at decisions being made at the municipal or CUD level. All right.
Okay.
And
Okay.
then, I'm sorry, Aubrey, did I cut you off? No, okay. So we'd mentioned the governor chair thing. And then finally, on page 9, back to the definition section, in the definition of a universal service plan, we've changed some language here, and so that it now reads a municipality or a communications union district, but it doesn't indicate, in which case you need to be presenting one or the other. And I believe the meaning here is a communication union district or a municipality that's not in a communication union district, but that this doesn't specify that.
I don't think we were trying to get rid of the section that had municipality, right?
Yeah.
Get rid of a municipality altogether?
No, we kept
Oh.
municipality in. We got rid of the telecom provider working with a municipality.
But the
Yeah.
definition is still there. In fact, we
Yeah,
expanded
the definition is of a municipality. Okay, so I am still, because we've got different page numbers.
So I'm in the definition section looking at the universal service plan definition.
Page
And
7.
the confusion that is being drawn out by
Oh,
which type of universal service plan is applicable to a certain circumstance.
page 9.
Is it on page 9 on ours?
Yes.
Yes.
Or
Okay.
12.
Okay, found it.
And, clearly a communication union district has an obligation to produce a universal service plan. With regard to a municipality, that is referring to a municipality that is a non-CUD municipality. Otherwise, you're producing a universal service plan for a whole communications union district.
Yeah, but it's not the municipality's plan. It's
That's correct. It would be a small communications carrier that would be producing that
or
plan.
a small telecom that
Right.
to cover every address in the municipality.
Yeah,
Berkshire.
right. We're sticking with the small communications carrier definition. There is no small telecommunications carrier. Thought we got rid of that.
No, there is. There's both.
Yeah.
There's a small
Okay.
small
What does
carrier.
5 counties? The telecom does we did the 5 counties instead of 3.
Okay.
And
I got
and we did
Waitsfield.
the telecom carrier regulated under subsection 227D.
Right. I got it. I'm colorblind.
Well,
I'm just going blind.
It's confusing because both colors we sort of absorb there.
Right. Okay. So this would essentially describe a municipality as a non-CUD municipality, as opposed to just a municipality, because a municipality could be in a communication union district, in which case you'd have to produce a universal service plan for a communication union district.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought at one point we had talked about in exactly that situation, you would have to be part of a plan, but it could be in doing this municipality, it worked with the CUD's plan. It was part of that bigger plan. The telecom didn't have to plan to do all, they just had to be in work under the plan of the CUD.
Well, I if I may, Madam Chair, I
Yeah.
think this used to say community, and we got rid of that. So I think what we're trying to say is a CUD, their universal plan is to serve everyone in every one of their towns, or to see that they're served, right? If you're not a CUD, then whoever comes forward for a grant has to have a universal service plan. Well, what does that mean? If it's Waitsfield Telecom, if they want to get a grant to build Charlotte, that works if they're committing to all of Charlotte. It's not forcing them to say, if you want a grant to build in Charlotte, you have to also cover Moortown where you have some territory. We're trying to say, does that make sense? That's what we're trying to do, I think.
You can't just do downtown. You've got to have a plan to cover the entire community that you're asking for a grant for.
But in the event you're a Comcast, a Consolidated, a Waitsfield Telecom, you could get a grant to take on one municipality in a universal way without, saying Consolidated, you've got to, maybe we should do that. You've got to build to your entire territory. Otherwise, that will exclude them, and presumably otherwise we wouldn't be in this situation.
But the point is, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. I
was going to say the point is not to, but the municipalities we're talking about are non-CUD municipalities, because what this definition says is that in a CUD you're producing a universal service plan for the entire CUD.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's the intent. Unless you're a CUD, unless you're a communication.
Oh,
unit
yeah,
district.
no, I think that's what we were trying to avoid. So you can work in partnership with the CUD and they, you sign a contract and I'll do Charlotte and you'll do the rest.
So-
Or you go into the board for a grant, you have to be committed to doing all of Charlotte, not just the board or downtown or the valley. And you can't negate or impede a CUD plan if that's a CUD town. It has to comply with the CUD's universal service plan.
I think I may
That's-
be under. Representative Briglin, would it make more sense? Because I think this is what we're trying to say. If we had a universal service plan, if you're a CUD, a universal service plan means a plan for providing each unserved and underserved location within your district. Or if you're not a CUD, it means a plan to provide coverage for everyone within a specific municipality. That's what I think we were after.
Okay. Avram, I didn't want to cut you off if you were trying to get in. So I think the shortcoming of that is if you have a municipality that's within a CUD, and a, whatever we're calling them, small carrier, small telco, comes along and decides to, without working with a CUD, but decides to offer that municipality the option of working with them to do a universal service plan for that municipality. The concern that those municipalities start dropping out of CUDs to do this.
That was our concern. And that's why we have that whole other section that says you're not going to have a contract with the municipality if it's in a CUD. You have to, in order to get the grant, the board has to find out it won't impede a CUD's plan. You have to agree to do all the homes in Berkshire. And it can't prevent, you can't just get a permit for downtown. You've got to agree, I'm going to do all of it. Or if you're working with the CUD and they say, well, we can come over the hill and do these because we've got wires right here. But this is to get a grant. If they want to come in and do it with their own dime, there's nothing we can do.
Yeah, understood. And that's not the concern here. The concern here is that a telco, small telco,
Yeah.
would approach a CUD town, see that CUD town is not on the build schedule until 2023, and say, hey, we can work with you in 2022.
Right.
The CUD town drops out of the CUD, and the telco applies for a grant to service a non-CUD town, essentially.
Okay, we hadn't thought about the dropping out. We were trying to say you couldn't cut a deal with the municipality that was in a CUD. But we hadn't thought about dropping out. I don't know if we can prevent that.
Is there anything that prevents? There's nothing that prevents that anyway. I guess I hear what you're saying. It's not our aim to enable that, but would that be so terrible? I mean, if the end result was a different provider built that town, and we do have that, the only way I think that scenario works is if they drop the CUD, they withdraw from the CUD.
Yep.
And then they get internet that's high speed a year earlier. I mean,
what starts to unravel is the scale with which a CUD is operating
Of course.
and their universal service plan that would include the 3 towns that decide to drop out of the, whatever, the Maple CUD.
The question would be, could it endanger their entire financial plan
Right.
as a result?
It's a scale issue.
This is
It's
to get a grant. So if the board's going to look at it, they're going to decide if having this one town that's not on the build schedule for several years get the grant, they don't have to drop out. I mean, if the telecom wants to do it on their own dime and the town wants to drop out because they don't want to, if they can get their town or the bulk of it done, we can't stop that. But if they're coming to us for a grant, the board has to look at the impact on the CUD and the likelihood that it's going to impact their business plan. Are we talking 5 years or 6 months? But this is to get a grant, not, they can do anything they want in their own dime.
Yeah. And so I think and again, this comes back to the universal service plan definition, but where I think we've been hanging our hat on the work that you did in the Senate version of the bill is this subsection E, which requires, basically says the board shall not award a grant in these conditions, essentially that it undermines the deployment plans. So that's great. But as you said, there's nothing to preclude a town or towns from dropping out of a CUD if they can work directly with a provider, a small carrier, who on their behalf will apply for a grant and provide universal service. The concern is that, this starts to unravel, kind of the CUD, the CUD infrastructure, if you will. And believe me, I'm not bringing this up to kind of bring us back to this, but this kind of comes back to how we wanted to define the eligible providers, which is kind of the working in conjunction with. But we don't need to replow, kind of that ground again.
And that's the central question is do we structure this and basically have all the grant money controlled by CUDs or not? And
well, I don't think the change in this universal service plan definition would make the CUDs controlling the money. Again, I'm stepping away from that definition of working in conjunction with. But I just wanted to be clear as to what we were trying to accomplish there. But coming back to the universal service plan definition, one half of this is what a CUD universal plan is. The other half of this, and again, I'm kind of dividing the world into two entities. You're in a CUD and you've got to be part of a universal service plan, or you're not in a CUD and you still have to have a universal service plan, but it's just for that municipality as opposed to, another entity.
I think we were staying with our basic goal in all of this, line 1 or 2 was to get universal access to high-speed broadband as quickly as possible. And so I think we see CUDs as a very viable means to get that service out to unserved and underserved areas because it hasn't been profitable for the for-profit businesses to do that. But I think we've also recognized that, and we chose not to deal with it here, but that you get out into poorer communities and affordability is an issue. And, you know, we're trying to find a balance. If the big boys will play by the same rules and do an entire town, or, I mean, if we say to a town, I'm sorry, but you've got to wait 3 years to get broadband because that's what the CUD plan is, they're going to drop out of the CUD anyway. If they can cut a deal with somebody else, where the only control we have is the grant. And I don't think we were envisioning a couple of towns dropping out of a CUD, and especially not on broad terms. You may well have a CUD that a year and a half from now is still figuring out who they are. You know, they haven't got, they're just not getting off the ground, and that's a possibility. So we're trying to find a way to funnel most of the money through the CUDs, but not preclude other options, because the CUDs are still unknown in the scale we're looking at them. We've got one success story, and we got 1 or 2 that are ready to start stringing some fiber, but the rest are just starting. Senator Pearson.
Do you have a proposal of how you'd like to change the universal service plan definition?
Well, again, you know, clearly we've opened up a bigger can here. What we were focused on was the confusion of, if an applicant comes forward for a grant and has to produce a universal service plan, which one do they produce? And there are 2 kinds here. There's one for a municipality, and there's one for a communications union district. And we were kind of looking at the world in, you know, essentially in 2 different camps. You're a communication union district and you have to have that universal service plan, or you're a non-CUD municipality, and similarly, you have to have that universal service plan for that town.
You keep adding municipality, and I don't think that's what we're thinking about in this case. We're not envisioning the select board of Charlotte being involved in it. We're saying, Waitsfield, you have to cover all of the town. So
yeah, and that's what I meant.
Confusing me.
Yeah, so the universal service plan is always produced by either the CUD or the telco. It's not by the town. But the universal service plan, at least in this definition, it is described by the, I'll call it, territory it covers. Does it cover a municipality or does it cover a CUD? And the point is if you are a telco stepping forward to service a municipality, you're not going to be looking to have to provide a universal service plan for a CUD.
Right.
You're looking to do it for that, again, what I was calling a non-CUD municipality.
Right.
Which
That
is,
I don't think we have any problem with.
well, okay, I just, what I want to be clear about is that the universal service plan is clearly produced by the telco ISP CUD. It's not produced by a town.
No.
But that there are 2 different kinds of these. There's the CUD, which is kind of a region and a multi-town, or there is one for a non-CUD municipality, which would be a single town. And here's my plan for Charlotte, if I'm Waitsfield, Champlain Valley Telecom. That is the simple distinction I'm trying to make.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine.
And I'm saying that this definition is confusing because you don't know, do I have to produce for a municipality or do I have to produce for the CUD? So that's why I wanted to further clarify that this means a non-CUD municipality.
Go for it.
Yep.
So, okay.
Now, if we do that though, and we don't allow a CUD municipality, I guess if they go in conjunction with the CUD, and they get it written off, they can go in partnership. That works.
Well, and that's the presumption, how this is
Okay.
going to work.
Okay. And we can't stop if the select board thinks they can get a better deal from a major provider, they can drop out. I don't think they sign an agreement when they go in that says they can't leave. And I don't think,
I think a town can drop out of a CUD at any time.
yeah. And we can't change that.
So, Representative Sibilia, we have, Laura, what I had basically gone through was I'm going to call it half dozen changes we were talking about. Most of them were wording changes. This was the one that we spent the most time on.
Yeah.
But I also mentioned two things that I would say that we were in, we had contrasting opinions relative to the Senate. One was the gubernatorial appointments, and the other was the overbuild language that was added. I can't remember what page that's on, but
I can't either, but you know what it is.
yeah. So those were I think, kind of two
21 on our version.
Yeah, that's right.
And so now we're talking about the definition of the universal service plan.
And I think we've agreed on what we want it to say.
So I guess what I would ask is, what's the best way to move from here to kind of conclusion? Senator Pearson, you had said, do you have language? We have language, but it's not Maria language. And maybe Maria has Maria language. So we can offer that up, but I don't know how we want to resolve these other two issues. If you all want to caucus, if we want to, have a wrestling match here.
Which two issues?
The two issues are the gubernatorial appointments. And then the other one is the overbuild language.
Okay, I think if you give us 5 to 10 minutes, if Faith can put us in a sub room, or can you?
Oh my, okay.
Can you
I
do
think
that?
you can.
Let me do that.
Okay.
And maybe while you're doing that, we'll work with Maria on some of this
Okay.
language.
Okay, I think, can we do that? We can all go back and talk on the telephone.
Give me a minute here.
Okay, Faith.
Yeah,
You
I got
got it?
room 1. If I hit join, am I?
Yeah, you guys are gonna go.
And can you take us off live for the moment,